the United States military began major combat operations in Iran.
Overnight, the United States crossed a line it had avoided for decades. Not sanctions, not proxy clashes, not covert strikes. War. Air assets deployed. Targets hit deep inside Iran. Retaliation launched within hours. The question isn't what happened. The question is why Washington decided that war was the only option left. Tonight, we break down the real strategic calculus behind the US declaration of war on Iran, and what this decision signals about where global power politics are heading next. Despite how it feels, this didn't begin overnight. Tensions between the US and Iran have been building for years. Sanctions intensified, nuclear negotiations stalled, missile development accelerated, regional proxy attacks increased. At some point, policymakers in Washington shifted from asking, "How do we contain this?" to asking, "How do we stop it?" That shift is everything. Let's start with the central issue: nuclear capability. For years, Iran maintained its program was peaceful, but enrichment levels rose. Inspection disputes escalated. Diplomatic talks stalled. From the US perspective, the risk was no longer gradual progress, it was breakout timing. Once intelligence assessments suggest a narrowing window between enrichment and weaponization capability. Strategic patience disappears, because once a state crosses that threshold, reversing it becomes exponentially harder. War, in that context, becomes framed as preemptive containment. Then there's the missile problem. Iran has invested heavily in ballistic and cruise missile development. These aren't symbolic weapons. They threaten US bases in the Gulf. They threaten Israel. They threaten shipping lanes and energy corridors. In modern warfare, missile capacity equals regional leverage. And Washington likely assessed that allowing Iran's missile network to grow unchecked would permanently alter the Middle East's balance of power. So degrading that network became a strategic objective. Iran doesn't project power conventionally. It projects through networks: militias in Iraq, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Houthis in Yemen, advisory forces in Syria. Over the past year, attacks attributed to Iran-aligned groups targeted US personnel and allied infrastructure. Each incident added pressure. Each escalation tested restraint. Eventually, Washington likely concluded that proxy containment wasn't working. And when deterrence fails repeatedly, escalation becomes more likely. There's another layer here. Israel views Iran as its primary existential threat. Missiles, funding of hostile groups, nuclear ambiguity. US and Israeli security coordination runs deep. Once Israel signaled it was prepared to escalate, Washington faced a strategic choice: act jointly, or risk being drawn in reactively later. Joint action offers planning control. Delayed reaction risks chaotic escalation. That calculation matters. War decisions are never purely external. Domestic politics shape timing. Strong executive authority, congressional divisions, national security framing. Presidents historically have launched military operations without formal war declarations. In this case, the framing was clear: imminent threat, national security risk, prevention over reaction. That framing builds public justification, but it also opens legal and political debate that may intensify as the conflict continues. There's another factor few people discuss openly: energy. The Strait of Hormuz remains one of the most critical choke points in global oil flow. Iran's ability to threaten shipping lanes gives it economic leverage. In a volatile global energy market, that leverage matters. If Washington believed Iran's growing military posture strengthened its ability to manipulate regional energy security, that risk becomes strategic, not just military. Some rhetoric surrounding the war has gone beyond military targets. There have been signals, subtle and direct, about political transformation inside Iran. Encouragement of public dissent, support for internal opposition. History tells us something here. External military pressure combined with internal unrest can either fracture a regime or solidify it. That's the gamble. And it's one with enormous uncertainty. Every war decision is a risk trade-off. The US likely assessed the cost of acting now versus the cost of allowing Iran's capabilities to mature further. Preemption always carries escalation risk, but waiting carries strategic drift. If intelligence assessments indicated narrowing timelines or heightened threat levels, leadership may have concluded the window was closing. And when windows close, decisions accelerate. Declaring war is not just tactical, it resets the regional chessboard. Iran will retaliate, directly or through proxies. Global markets will react, major powers will reposition diplomatically, and the duration of this conflict will depend on one key variable: objectives. If the objective is degradation of specific military assets, the timeline may be limited. If the objective expands toward regime destabilization or total infrastructure dismantling, this becomes a much longer, more dangerous engagement. So why did the United States declare war on Iran? Because diplomacy stalled, because nuclear timelines raised alarms, because missile capacity shifted the regional balance, because proxy deterrence failed, because strategic patience expired. War is rarely one reason, it's accumulation. And when accumulation reaches a tipping point, leaders choose between escalation and acceptance. Washington chose escalation. Now the world watches what that decision unleashes next.